Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we are going to be breaking the Week 9 main slate of college football DFS for the 2025 season. Y'all, I truly cannot believe that we are already in Week 9. It is time for there pretty much to be games on a weekly basis that have major college football playoff implications. There are big-time conference matchups every single week. This is when the DFS season is going to get really good because we're going to have a lot of even matchups, a lot of more predictable matchups. And that's kind of where we're able to make our hay, right? Because if we're able to have a better chance at predicting stuff right, then that's going to be good for our lineups. Here on this episode, we're going to break down everything you need to know about all 12 games on the DraftKings main slate, as well as who needs to be in or out of your DFS lineups in these games, as well as any leans if you are betting player props or betting sides or totals on these games. Now, before we continue, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. That we can be with us for the rest of the college football season all the way up until the national championship game in January. And also, if you're subscribed, you'll know when all of our content drops. Like I've said before, I'm not going to be able to have content for every single slate because I am a busy man. But when I do, you'll know when it drops. And you'll also be able to know when we go live, which we're planning on going live tomorrow night to talk about the Week 9 main slate around Thursday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. But if you're subscribed, you'll know when that is. All right, we got 12 games to break down, y'all. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So I do want to start off by saying that this is not like the best DraftKings slate in terms of game environments that I have ever seen. There's a lot of games on this slate that do have some upside, but do have massive paths to failure from a DFS perspective, to where some of these games that have fairly high projected totals, fairly high totals in Vegas, could certainly get there, but also have upside to go, or downside, I should say, to go way under. So this is going to be a slate where I do think there's going to be a lot of landmines, and avoiding those landmines and finding consistent producers is going to be a recipe for success this week. Because one game that I don't see failing is South Florida taking on Memphis, one of the games of the year in the American Athletic Conference. South Florida is 4.5-point favorites with a game total of 62.5. That is the second highest on the slate, meaning the implied total is about 33-29 in favor of Bulls. The big reason why is because of Byron Brown, South Florida's quarterback. He is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I would highly recommend watching this guy play if you would not. He is a dual threat. He is electric with the ball in his hands, and he's simply one of the best players in all of Group 5 football. And when you look at what this guy has done in conference play, it has been truly incredible. One thing I'm a big proponent of this point in the season is when you look at these players, really look at what they're doing in conference play with a relatively level playing field, I should say, relative to their competition. And you can see what they're really up to, right? Against Charlotte, 46 DraftKings points. Against North Texas, 39 DraftKings points. Against FAU, 42 DraftKings points. He's literally averaging 42 DraftKings points per game in conference play. And oh, by the way, Memphis, who's been pretty good this season so far, 94th in the nation in passing yards allowed. They've been a little bit of a pass funnel. That should be music to Brown's ears. They're using him as a runner quite a bit, at least 14 carries in every single conference game. I think he's one of the top quarterback plays on the slate. He's going to make a ton of my DraftKings lineups. Now, the running back position for South Florida, this is just kind of a muddled mess, if I'm being honest. I don't really have any interest in getting to it. Franklin, Isaac, Davenport are all going to see a good amount of carries. I know that Norton's out. That is one less member of the committee. To me, it does give a little bit more upside to Franklin and Isaac, but neither of them are seeing enough of a carry share, with Byron Brown also getting double-digit carries to make them worth playing. Davenport mainly sees run in garbage time. At the wide receiver position, there is some intrigue here for me. So Chaz Nimrod, formerly of Tennessee, has been their best receiver throughout the season, but he is currently questionable for this game. We do not know if he is going to suit up. If he does not suit up, which he did not last game, that is going to bring a ton of upside to the likes of Keyshawn Singleton, who's been pretty much their wide receiver 2 all season long, as well as Jeremiah Coger, who has caught 4 passes exactly for at least 75 yards and 1 touchdown in each of the last 3 games. Coger has came out of nowhere to be one of the top weapons in this offense, and he's a guy that I'm certainly going to be stacking with Brown if Nimrod is out. I do think Nimrod is very playable if Nimrod is in. You may also see some usage for Mudia Rubin, who's been a consistent part of the offense, but not a huge factor. And then Christian Neptune gets a ton of targets. He's used all the time, but he really doesn't catch deep passes. He only has 1 pass this season that he's caught above 30 or above 15 yards, and it was 32. Only scored 1 touchdown on the season. So I don't think there's a whole lot of upside there, but if you're like looking for a guy that's going to be on the field, Neptune will be on the field quite a bit. Now on the Memphis side, this is where things get a little bit murky. So Memphis's quarterback, Brendan Lewis, did get hurt in the last game that they played. His status for this game is very up in the air, and that creates a huge problem for playing Memphis in DFS. And a big reason why is because I think a lot of this team's success has been tied to how good Lewis has been. So there's no guarantee that the offense is going to be any good with Lewis out. And we really just don't know where we're going to be able to target this offense if Lewis is out. Now, another thing that DraftKings does, you do not get this in the NFL. DraftKings prices the backup quarterback the exact same or close to the exact same as the starter. So, like, we're not getting, if it's AJ Hill, we're not getting like some $4,000 min price scrub starting that we can use to save a ton of salary. He's the exact same price as Brendan Lewis. If Lewis is active, I think he's a play. If Hill is the starter because Lewis is out, I have no interest. At the running back position for Memphis, this is another situation I have no interest. And it's not because these guys aren't good. It's because South Florida has been a pretty stout run defense so far this season, and they're splitting carries. It's DeRozier and it's Smith. It's about 50-50 split. They're both priced up way too high. I would rather not play that shell game of trying to figure out who's the running back going to be, especially when they cost that much. And then the wide receiver position for Memphis, I am really only interested in Cortez Braham Jr., but my main interest to him is tied to if Brendan Lewis is playing. If Brendan Lewis is playing, I think this is a very stackable game environment where you can play both sides of USF and Memphis. If Lewis is out, I really just have a lot of interest in the USF side. All right, game number 2. This is a game that I think has some major downside. That is the opposite of upside, right? Some major downside. Ole Miss taking on Oklahoma. And a big reason why is because of the play style that Oklahoma is currently exhibiting under Brent Venables. As it stands right now, Oklahoma is 4.5-point favorites with a game total of 54.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 29 to 25 in favor of the Sooners. So with this Oklahoma team, what you're seeing right now is a team that has very little going on offense, just very little going on offense. Last week against South Carolina, John Mateer threw his season low for yards in a single game with 150, which is not good, especially considering that he's coming off of this hand surgery, and especially considering what happened in the Texas game where he didn't look all that effective either. And they're really slowing the game down. They're really playing good defense. The Oklahoma defense has been really, really stout. And I think that there's a chance that this could totally turn into a ball control, muddled type of game environment because of the Oklahoma side. Now, on the Ole Miss side, we've talked about all season. I love Trinidad Chambliss. I think he's a good player. I think he's a good, generally DFS play. But this week, he is priced all the way up at 8,800, and I just struggle to see how he's going to hit value for that salary going up against this Oklahoma defense. The Oklahoma is better than all the defenses he's played so far. Granted, he's put up some really good DraftKings scores so far, but I just don't really have a lot of interest with this matchup against Oklahoma. With Kawan Lacey at running back for Ole Miss, there's a little bit of give and take, right? Because I bang the drum all season long for play workhorse running backs, play guys where you know they're the RB1, you know they're going to get 20 touches. And Lacey's that guy. Like, he touches the ball a lot. But the downside is the Oklahoma run defense is one of the best in the nation. And so Lacey, a guy who literally has not scored under 18 DraftKings points all season long, this could be the first time he does that. And that has me worried, especially when his price tag is $6,900. Then at the wide receiver position for Ole Miss, this is another stay away for me. Like, look, if I play Chambliss, it's probably just going to be solo, like unstacked, because good luck figuring out which Ole Miss receiver it's going to be. Last week, Dejon Stribling took a 75-yard or took a hitch route 75 yards to the house, and that was like the one play he made. Whereas Lee and Wallace were like total non-factors against Georgia. They're just really hard to pin down in terms of who's going to be the leading receiver, and just don't target it if you don't want to. Now, on the Oklahoma side, Ole Miss is not like this legendary defense, but at the same time, I very much doubt this Oklahoma team's ability to manufacture points. I watched them play against Texas. Mateer did not look right. I watched them against South Carolina. Mateer still did not look right. And my thesis on this Oklahoma team for the entire season has been that the rest of the offense around John Mateer is below average. And John Mateer is not going to be able to carry this team with a Terminator hand. Whatever they did to that hand, I don't think it's natural. He's up there at $8,900 in DraftKings, which means he needs about 27 DraftKings points for you to feel good about playing him. Yeah, I don't think he's going to be getting that. In all conference games so far, he's been under 23, including back when he had a healthy hand taking on Auburn. I just don't have any. I do think I might have a little bit of mild interest in the running back, Torrey Blaylock. He is starting to turn into a workhorse running back for this team. Last week in South Carolina, he had 19 carries. Look, if they're looking to take the pressure off Mateer and use the ground game a little bit more, I could see them doing that with Blaylock. He's going to be in consideration for me. At the wide receiver position, Isaiah Satania was a chalk value play last week because he was just straight up mispriced. But now he's priced appropriately at $5,600, and I don't have any interest. Deion Burks, priced appropriately at $4,500. Don't have any interest. Like I said, I just think there's pathways to this Oklahoma offense just completely bottoming out and failing us here on this Saturday slate. Game number 3 is going to be, I believe they call this like the Sunflower State Showdown or something like that. Maybe I have the name wrong, but it is Kansas State traveling to Lawrence to take on the Kansas Jayhawks. Kansas is 2.5-point favorites with a game total of 56.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 29-27 in favor of the Jayhawks. Now, this is another one of those games like Mississippi and Ole Miss where I do think there's some genuine downside. Both of these teams are content to run the football. Very high rush rates in this game. So you could absolutely see a game with not a whole lot of possessions. You could absolutely see a game with conservative play calling. But both of the defenses in this game are quite bad. And so that also means that the offenses could have a lot of success, and there could be a lot of scoring, and there could be a lot of pedal to the metal, right? We'll see. I think there's a lot of upside and a lot of downside to this game. Kind of like Kansas State's quarterback, Avery Johnson. I think there's a lot of upside and a lot of downside to Avery Johnson. The upside is he's an incredible athlete who is one of the best running quarterbacks in all of college football. The downside is, oh boy, well, you never know what's going to happen when he throws it. And when he has a good throwing day, you end up with a pretty good DraftKings score, like when he put up 36 DraftKings points against Baylor. Also, in conference play has not been bad. 27 against Iowa State, 22 against UCF, 22 against TCU. Pretty solid, especially considering this Kansas defense is one of the worst in the Big 12. They're 126th nationally in rushing yards allowed. With Johnson being a dual threat, I think this makes it a really good spot for him. And I really think it's a good spot for him if Dylan Edwards is out. What you have seen from this Kansas State team is that when Dylan Edwards has been injured, you have seen a higher carry share for Avery Johnson. When Edwards has been healthy, Edwards has gotten the rock. Joe Jackson will be the running back if Edwards was not healthy. He has not shown us any upside to think he can hit value for his current price tag. So I'm currently out on him, but I do think that it's a big boost to Avery Johnson. Dylan Edwards is out. At the wide receiver position, there are a few guys we do need to talk about for this Kansas State side. They're not bad. Jace Brown, 52 targets through 7 games. That's a little over 7 a game. Pretty solid, consistent option. And then what you've seen is that Jaron Bradley is now back from injury. And what that has done, he's still a consistent part of the offense. Last game he played 2 catches, 26 yards, and a touchdown. I think he's absolutely worth a shot at $3,400. What he did was he ate into Jerron Tibbs' workload just a little bit. Tibbs only caught 3 passes against TCU. I think Tibbs is a little overpriced now at $5,100. Garrett Oakley is the tight end at $4,700. Look, you're just hunting for touch if you play Garrett Oakley. He's not going to get you huge yardage totals, but might fall into the end zone once or twice. So I do think that when you're looking at a stacking partner for Avery Johnson, you can play Jace Brown, you can play Garrett Oakley, or you can punt and play Jaron Bradley. But either way, I do think that Avery Johnson does have a ton of upside to play, which means I'm probably going to be looking to play one of those state wide receivers. Now, on the Kansas side, they've also got a dual threat quarterback that has a ton of upside, and that is Jalen Daniels. Holy crap, he has been there forever. I guess he is on the Hunter Dickinson plan. Anyway, Jalen Daniels is, I've forever said that this Kansas team has a chance to upset anybody in the Big 12 as long as Jalen Daniels is healthy. That was what they showed us last year. They could go up and get the best of the conference. They could also bottom out pretty bad, especially when he was hurt. But Daniels does have a ton of upside from a DFS perspective. 41 DraftKings points against Cincinnati. I wouldn't shock me if he does something similar to that here, especially considering that Kansas State is not a good defense. They rank 81st nationally in rushing yards allowed. So I do think that with Daniels being a dual threat, he can put up some yardage here. At the running back position, this is tough. We've played the whole Highshaw and LaShawn Williams game too much. I'm out on both of them. Hard pass. The wide receiver position, I do think you can play Jalen Daniels unstacked, but I also do think he has a supremely clear stacking partner if you do want to stack him, and that is Emmanuel Henderson Jr. Played 7, has 43 targets so far. That's a little over 6 a game. That is by far the most on the team. So he's really the only guy you need to be considering. Cam Pickett, former Maction star, has been pretty good, especially recently. Just hasn't scored since week 0. So, he might be worth a look as a partner as well. All right, game number 4 is a battle in the SEC between Syracuse and Georgia Tech. This one is Georgia Tech as 17.5-point favorites with a game total of 52.5, meaning the implied total is about 35-17 in favor of the Yellow Jackets. This is another game that I think could totally bottom out. Georgia Tech ranks 124th in the nation in pass rate, which means they rank 13th in the nation in rush rate. Georgia Tech is a team that just totally content to build a lead, grind, play super conservatively. They very rarely cover when they are big-time favorites, but also I think that this game environment, for it to take off, you would need Syracuse to score points and push them, and I just don't really have a whole lot of confidence in Syracuse doing that. Right? Ricky Collins has been the starter for Syracuse ever since Steve Angeli got hurt for the season. And Ricky Collins has just not been what they needed. Maybe there's a reason he was always the backup at LSU. He only put up one game over 15 DraftKings points, which is not what you want when you're paying $6,400 for him. He does have a little bit of rushing upside to have used him as a runner in each of the last 2 games. You're going to really need him to find something that he hasn't shown this season. If you play him, I do think the only situation to play him would be in terms of a game stack, because I do think that if Syracuse is scoring points, it's quite likely that Georgia Tech's going to be scoring points as well. At the running back position, Syracuse does have a workhorse running back in Yassine Willis. I like him quite a bit. I think he's at a very affordable price tag at $5,700. He has not been the same ever since Angeli has been out, though. He hasn't scored since week 2. It's not great. So I do think his success is a little bit tied to the offense. So, again, only a game stack play for me, but I don't even know if I'm going to get there. It's kind of disappointing to see what's happened to Willis this season, because I do think he's a good player. Syracuse also does have a plethora of receivers that they throw to. Because they throw the ball so much, they're near the top nationally in pass rate. You do get multiple receivers who can get there. Cook is probably the favorite to get there, followed by the tight end. Just as Ross Simmons is questionable for the game, have to expand the role with Darrell Gill if Ross Simmons is out. Gill really had that huge game against FCS Colgate and has been quiet ever since, until he scored a touchdown last week, again, when Ross Simmons was out. So that's really the only situation I'm targeting these Syracuse guys is I think Ross Simmons being out would condense the target shares a little bit more and make them a little bit more playable. Now, on the Georgia Tech side, so Georgia Tech's quarterback is one of my favorites to watch in all of college football. It's Haynes King. We talked about Haynes King a lot last week, and Haynes King is a dog, y'all. Like, he is going to run the ball. He's going to run the ball hard. He's not afraid of contact, not afraid of physicality. And because of how he runs, he ends up putting up a lot of DraftKings points, right? He can be a very, very good DFS play, even at $600, because of the rushing upside that he has. We saw him put up 40 against Colorado. We saw him put up 39 against Wake. He can do that. But like I've been telling you, though, you need the game environment to be pushed for him to put up a lot. So the main scenario where he's going to go off is if Syracuse is scoring points as well. So it might be wise to play a Syracuse guy or two if you're playing King, because like I said, I think the main scenario where he goes off is when he's being pushed. His 2 highest scoring games this season were the 2 closest games Georgia Tech has played. Now, at the running back position, this is annoying. Jamal Haynes has been great for the last 2 seasons. He's an explosive runner. I like him a lot. But now they're doing this 50-50 committee with him and Hosley. And Hosley's been good. Like, no disrespect to Hosley. Hosley's a good football player. But it's annoying for DFS because it makes both of them kind of unplayable. You would be really relying on them to break off a long run. But keep in mind, carry share is not that, because Haynes King is getting a lot of carries also. At the wide receiver position, it's very simple. You got Rivers, Rutherford, Canyon. They all score about the same in DraftKings points. Their target shares are fairly equal. The more explosive player of the 3 is Rivers. The lower ADOT guy is Rutherford. Canyon is kind of the more random guy. If I were playing one, it'd be Rivers, but I totally understand playing Haynes King unstacked because a lot of his upside is through his legs. All right, that's for the first 4 games. Let's take a quick breather, and then we're going to move on with the next set. All right, before we continue, I do want to mention there are places where you can get more information from me. First off, you can follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. I'm more than happy to answer any questions if you reach out to me, as well as it's where I all updates for the show as well. I'm also in the Fantasy Corner Discord. Link is in the description on YouTube, as well as the audio feed is 100% free. If you're looking for a community of people to be a part of where you can talk DFS for college football and any other sport for that matter, a lot of really good, really smart people. It's the place to go. We're constantly in there talking ideas, lineup strategies, bouncing ideas off each other, and also alerting each other with injuries, which is quite helpful on a slate like this where there are guys that you're going to need to know whether they're in or out. It's just a great place to be. Cannot recommend it enough. And then also, if you want to know who actually makes all of my college football DFS lineups, head on over to the Patreon, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. I post an article every single college football DFS slate with my core plays, as well as a write-up why they're my core plays. So you're not just getting the information, but you're also getting the reasoning from someone who knows what they're talking about with this stuff. All right, let's now continue on with the next game, which is in my home state of North Carolina. We've got Virginia taking on North Carolina. Virginia, only 10.5 point favorites. That seems shocking to me because North Carolina's a dumpster fire. Total of 51.5 points. meaning the implied total is about 31-20 in favor of Virginia. On the Virginia side, I really like Chandler Morris this week. He is a guy who has shown the upside to do it with his arm and his leg, especially like in that FSU game when he scored 3 touchdowns. He's also a guy that has been pretty efficient through the air this season. He hasn't been all that great in the last 2 games, only combining for about 19 DraftKings points. But here's the deal. UNC is kind of a pass funnel. The Belichick defense at USC has really sold out to stop the run, has really failed to stop the pass. We all remember opening night on TCU, how that looked. We all remember when they played Clemson, how they got bombed by a wide receiver pass on the first play of the game. North Carolina ranks 123rd in pass yards allowed. That makes Morris a very sneaky play, in my opinion. At the running back position for Virginia, they have a guy that's interesting. I like him, but I also don't. It is Jamari Taylor. So basically, when you look at Taylor, he gets a ton of carries when the games are close. If the games are blowouts, they don't really use him a whole lot. So if you think that North Carolina keeps this game close, play Taylor. If not, avoid the situation entirely because he's going to split. Once the game's in hand, they get him out of there. Now, at the wide receiver position, Virginia does have 2 guys that they do target quite a bit. Cam Ross is the leader in targets on the season with 43. They've also got Jamal Edrine, who is at 37, and Trell Harris at 36. So they do target 3. I should have said 3. I meant 3 at the start. They do target all 3 of these guys pretty heavily. Ross is the guy who is going to get more of your like design touches. You know, he did score on a rushing touchdown against Washington State. That's kind of stuff they'll give him. Trell Harris does have a pretty high ADOT. He's generally a deeper guy. And then Edrine is kind of a wild card. Had a really good game against Washington State, though. So I don't know. I do think all 3 of them are playable. The most dependent one might probably be Ross because of how they get him the football. Now on the North Carolina side, there's just not a whole lot to get excited here. I've watched this North Carolina team because there are guys that I coached high school football against that play for this team. There are a lot of people I know that are fans of this team being from North Carolina, and it's just hard to build an argument for them being any good. Like I just don't think they correctly construct roster. They did not get a good offensive line. They did not get enough help for their quarterback. I've watched enough to know that Gio Lopez is not the problem for this team. I've always been a Gio Lopez fan. I think he's really talented. I think he's got a lot in there. He needs to get out of this situation. Or North Carolina needs to spend on the offensive line and wide receiver rooms to help him out. He's only $6,200. We know he's super talented. I just don't see him having a whole lot of success here. Also, the days of Damon June as the workhorse running back were quite short-lived. It now appears to be Ben Hall that is the workhorse running back for this team. Look, it's Belichick doing Belichick things, right? Like he did it when he was with the Patriots, never settled on one running back. So why would he do it now? Kind of out on playing it all together. And then at the wide receiver position, their number 1 wide receiver is Jordan Shipp. He's the best one, most targeted player in the season. But with the overall limited success of the offense, he just hasn't really done a whole lot with it. So I'm kind of out. It is worth noting Kobe Paysour was one of their better return receivers. Was hurt at the start of the season, been kind of eased into the lineup. Did have a huge game against Cal, 6 for 101. Maybe it's something, maybe it's nothing, but it's definitely worth mentioning to you guys. All right, next up, we have a game that a month ago would have seemed like just totally irrelevant, but now it's the number 2 team in the country taking on one of the hottest teams in the country, UCLA taking on Indiana. Indiana is 25.5-point favorites with a game total of 54.5 points, meaning the implied score is about 40-14 in favor of the Hoosiers. Okay, so all that resurgence from UCLA didn't help this spread a whole lot, but, you know, the new offense with Jerry Neuheisel, there's an argument this team can score points. They're really using Nico Imaliava's strengths a little bit more now. I think it's a much better designed offense for him. But $6,000 to play a guy that's going up against this Indiana defense, that's kind of a tough sell to me right now. I think if you want to build out a game stack lineup for this one, that would be the way to go. I don't think you really need to play any other UCLA skill players with Nico, though, because I'm going to be honest, the running back position is totally a committee. It's a game of roulette. You don't know which one it's going to be on any given week. And then wide receiver position, it's pretty much usually Quasi Gilmer, just the wide receiver 1. But here's the problem. He's $5,600. He's too expensive. Like that's too much to pay for him. Rico Flores down here at the $32. He's back healthy. He was pretty good back in his time at Notre Dame, but UCLA doesn't really use him a whole lot. All right, now on the Indiana side, they've got Fernando Mendoza, who might sneak into being the number 1 pick in the NFL draft when everything's said and done. Like you can call me crazy, but like none of the other quarterbacks that were supposed to be near the top are looking all that hot this season. And he's playing really, really well. And he's a big-time upgrade from what they had at quarterback last year. No disrespect to Curtis Work. Fernando Mendoza is a talent. And Mendoza has a ton of upside. But it's tied directly to his touchdown totals, right? His best games are when he throws for 5 touchdowns. I mean, I know that's not inventing the wheel to say that, right? So you're dependent on him throwing for that many touchdowns if you play him. And, with them having an implied total of 40 points, is there a chance he does it? Absolutely. Is there a chance that I'm going to play any Indiana running back? Absolutely not. It's a committee. We've gone over this time and time again. I'm more likely to play an Indiana running back on a small slate where I know I don't have as many options and I know I can take chances on the roulette wheel popping up for all the options. But in a big slate like this, I'm not playing a running back in a committee. Wide receiver position, it's also kind of tough because Indiana has multiple guys that they can throw to, and a lot of them are quite good at football. The number one wide receiver on the season has been Elijah Surratt, 57 targets through 7 games. That's a little over 8 a game. But Omar Cooper's not too far behind. Omar Cooper almost has 7 per game, a little higher ADOT than Surratt as well. But here's the problem. They're both really expensive, which makes them really tough to target. Now, if you want to really get cute, you can play E.J. Williams Jr. coming off the big game against Michigan State, but Surratt and Cooper definitely are the 2 guys that have the priority in this room. All right, next game up, we have got Auburn taking on Arkansas. A little battle in the SEC. Arkansas is 1.5 favorites with the game total of 56.5 points, meaning the implied total or the implied score is about 29-28 in favor of the Razorbacks. So I'm going to throw out a comparison here. And this is just what it reminds me of. Every time I watch Arkansas, I mentioned to you guys here on the podcast before that I coach the girls flag football team at the high school that I teach at. And watching Arkansas reminds me of flag football. That is not to say that Arkansas plays like a bunch of girls. That is not to say that Arkansas does not tackle, but the offensive philosophy of flag football and the offensive philosophy of what you want to do against Arkansas are the exact same thing. When I design my offense in flag football, it's designed on getting my fastest girls out of base and hoping that they can make the other team miss flag poles. And eventually they're going to miss a flag pole and we're going to score because they're going to outrun everybody, right? Playing Arkansas is the same way. Arkansas is such a poor tackling defense that teams who play them just look to get their athletes out in space, and eventually they're just going to bust through for one. We saw it with Notre Dame with Jeremiah Love. We saw it last week with Texas A&M and Reuben Owens. You just eventually bust one against this Arkansas defense, which, by the way, I also did have a few people ask. We did go 2-0 Tuesday night in the 2 games that we played. So definitely rolling into conference play with a lot of momentum, hoping to keep it going. Anyway, let's talk about the Auburn side. So we think that this is a great situation to target, right? So that would mean it's a great situation to play Jackson Arnold, right? Unfortunately, no. Apparently, he's splitting snaps in practice with Ashton Daniels, and we don't know who's going to start for this team. If I knew that Arnold was going to start, I'd be all over him because he's got a ton of rushing upside. This is a great spot. Arkansas ranks outside the top 15 in both passing yards allowed and rushing yards allowed. It's insane. But you can't play a quarterback who's going to split snaps. At the running back position, this is where I do really want to target Auburn. That's tough to say back-to-back because of the 2 sounds there. Jeremiah Cobb is now the workhorse running back. 19 attempts against Missouri, turned into 111 yards. And Missouri's run defense is one of the best in the country. Arkansas is one of the worst in the country. This is a great matchup for Jeremiah Cobb. I think he's a sneaky play at 5,900. He might be a core play for me. At the wide receiver position, this is where where Auburn gets interesting. They really only throw to 2 guys. It's Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton. Like I was saying earlier, these 2 are both elite level athletes. They're just not scoring a lot of DraftKings points right now, not because they're not getting volume, not because they're not getting targets, because they're not scoring touchdowns. And against a defense like Arkansas, implied to score 28 points if you're Auburn, you're going to score touchdowns. And so Coleman and Singleton, huge upside plays for me this week. They're going to make my player pool. I think you can play either one of them without the quarterback because they only throw to 2 guys. So, no matter who's at quarterback or if they're splitting snaps, the quarterback might not get there, but one of these 2 guys might if they're having some success in the passing game. Now let's go to the Arkansas side. So the Auburn defense, golly, these 2 teams playing in the same game is really throwing me for a loop with my pronunciations here. So the Auburn defense has been quite good over the course of the season. I think they're one of the best in the country, but I think there's a lot of quit in them right now. And I don't mean that negatively or disparaging against any kid that's playing for Auburn or anything like that. What I mean by that is I don't think that extra oomph is there right now. They're close to just punting on the season because they're not going to the college football playoff. Doesn't even look like they might even they're even going to go bowling, even though I think that they're a better team than that. It's just not looking pretty, right? And so the Arkansas offense, playing with interim coach Bobby Petrino, the Arkansas offense is out there scoring points, right? Because they know they have to because their defense is so bad. And Bobby Petrino, I don't think he even cares about that. Bobby Petrino just wants to light up the scoreboard. Taylor Green, I've called him a G5 merchant before. I generally stand by that, but he's proven me wrong each of the last 2 weeks. 28 DraftKings points against Tennessee, 44 against Texas A&M. Look, if you can put up 44 DraftKings points against Texas A&M, you can do it against an Auburn defense that is on the verge of quitting football. So Taylor Green, $8,400, definitely going to make my player pool this week. Ton of upside. Now, at the running back position, Arkansas, does have Mike Washington, who has been a revelation for them after transferring in from Buffalo. Back-to-back games over 20 DraftKings points. He's the workhorse, 15 carries in 4 straight games. Like I said earlier, Auburn's a pretty good defense, but they're definitely not what they were at the start of the season. He's going to be worth a look at 6,100 for him. And then at the wide receiver position, got to shout out my guy, Charlotte transfer Omega Blake. He leads the entire slate in targets, almost 9 targets a game, 62 targets through 7 games, which is an insane stat line. At least 5 catches in every single game. He has a floor that no other receiver on this slate has because of that target volume. I like him a lot in this matchup against Auburn. I'm also down to play CJ Brown. So basically, we've got an injury to the other Brown for Arkansas. I believe it's Jalen Brown. And CJ Brown stepped in last week, 5 for 38 and a touchdown, 8 total targets. He's only $3,200. If Jalen Brown continues to be out, then CJ Brown is going to be a play that I'm going to be looking at. Next up, we've got Alabama taking on South Carolina. Alabama is 12.5-point favorites with a game total of 47.5, meaning the implied total is about 30-17 in favor of the Crimson Tide. Y'all, can I be honest? This is a game that I might just totally cross off. I just see this being a game where Alabama controls it from the tip. But kickoff, I guess. I'm not talking about basketball. Alabama controls it from kickoff and is never in any danger and doesn't really ever have to, push the accelerator to the floor because they're just not tested. I just don't see South Carolina having a whole lot for this team. The weakness of the Alabama teams on the offensive and defensive lines, South Carolina's not going to be able to take advantage of that. So I see this being a game for Ty Simpson, very similar to the one he had against Missouri, very similar to the one he had against Tennessee, where you're not getting enough passing volume or big plays or game environment for him to get you a high DraftKings total. And $8,200, to me, that's a bad investment. At the running back position, I'm still not convinced that Alabama can run the football. Jam Miller is good, but he's quite expensive, kind of out. At the wide receiver position, it's the similar concept with Ty Simpson. Like, I just don't think these guys are going to get enough volume that unless you get this 2 touchdown game out of them, you're not going to be getting your money's worth. And so, yeah, Williams, Bernard, do they have upside? Yes. Are they getting consistently targeted? Yes. But unless they get a touchdown, they're not going to get there on volume. They're not going to get there on yards. So you need them to fall in the end zone. I will mention, though, Latzir Brooks coming on strong lately, 4 for 58, 3 for 39 in his last 2 games. He's only $3,100. I'd be more inclined to play a guy like that at only $3,100 because if he just does what he's been doing, he's going to hit value. If he scores a touchdown, he might be one of the plays of the slate. On the South Carolina side, I think you can totally cross this team off altogether. Lenoris Sellers was a darling in the preseason. He was one of my dark horse picks to win the Heisman Trophy, but just hasn't gotten it done this year. The whole South Carolina offense hasn't gotten it done this year. They haven't been good. So they're a total cross off for me. I'm not interested. And the skill position players are just kind of a mess because they spread the ball around so much. And I'm just not interested. Like, could Lenoris Sellers recapture the magic of last season? I mean, maybe, but I don't think it's likely enough that he is worthy of making a player pool at that price tag with this matchup. All right, it's 8 games down. Let's take a quick breather, and then we're going to get to the last 4. All right, before we continue, if this video is helping you out, please hit the like button if you're watching on YouTube. Please rate and review for listening on audio. It helps me out a ton when you guys do that. I cannot stress enough. I really do appreciate it. This is our biggest time of growth this time of year with college football. And so with every like that throws us to the top of the algorithm, every comment that throws us to the algorithm, every rate and review helps me out a ton. I really do appreciate it. All right, let's continue on now with Missouri taking on Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's 2.5-point favorites with a game total of 52.5. Meaning the implied total is Vanderbilt 27-25. Now, can I go on a little bit of a rant? So it's been an en vogue thing to do to criticize College Game Day for only going to SEC schools this season, right? And I think this week you're totally off base if you're criticizing that. This is the matchup of the weekend in college football. And Vanderbilt is one of the stories of the season in college football. This program was the worst team in the SEC. A few years ago, they were a laughingstock. Nick Saban was making jokes about them. Like, bro, if Nick Saban's making jokes about you, you know how bad that has to be. Like, Nick Saban doesn't joke about anything. And so Vanderbilt is now a serious college football playoff contender. This is a great story. This is a quarterback with a great story, and it's the best game of the weekend, bar none. And people want to criticize College Game Day for going to an SEC school when it is one of the biggest stories in college football, when it is one of the best games of the weekend. Get out of here with that. Like, this is a story that deserves to be shared. This is a school that deserves to be on to. It's cool. Deal with it. I don't care that they're in the SEC. This is cool. All right. College Game Day deserves to be the best game every weekend. This is it. Now, this is also a game that I could see for DFS purposes failing, like we've said before. So both of these teams, high rush rates, not fast tempos. Both these teams are probably going to be content to just play keep away from each other for most of the game. We saw this with Vanderbilt and LSU last week. Like, there was not a whole lot of possessions in that game. So while the offenses had a lot of success, the scoring wasn't something that went crazy. I do believe the total still went over, but it was nothing crazy because of the fact that there just wasn't a whole lot of possessions because of the slow tempo that both teams played at. I could see this game absolutely going in that direction as well. Now, on the Missouri side, good news and bad news. The good news is they have a very condensed, predictable offense. The bad news is the Vanderbilt defense is pretty good. Probably going to be the best they've played. Bo Prabula, $6,900. Pretty good price tag. But when you look at what he's done in SEC play, 19, 10, 25, 17. So in other words, he's about good for about 17, 18 DraftKings points a game. $6,900 against a good defense, probably a pass for me. Ahmad Hardy at running back has been one of the best running back transfers this season, especially when you consider the ones that went G5 to Power 4. He's great. Like, he's just a really good football player. He's going to get the rock quite a bit, but it's a tough matchup. So it depends on what you are focusing on. If you are focusing on paying for volume, then Hardy should be your guy. If you're looking at target matchups, probably not your guy. At the wide receiver position, like I said, it is pretty condensed for this Missouri team. Their best receiver on the season has been Kevin Coleman, formerly of Mississippi State. He's pretty good. Like, he's real solid. Had a game where he had 12 catches against UMass. You just don't really know in terms of his consistency, though. Like, if this offense doesn't have a whole lot of passing success, it's not going to be for Coleman. And then also you got Norfleet at $3,600 that is just a random tight end, like, touchdown score. He might fall in the end zone twice and pay for himself that way. Now, let's go to the Vanderbilt side. So for Vanderbilt, as we mentioned, this team is not a team that throws the ball a whole lot, which would considerably hurt Diego Pavia's fantasy chances, right? Not really, because Pavia has turned into a true dual threat. He's been that ever since he's been at New Mexico State, and that has allowed him to score a ton of DraftKings points in bunches. Now, like I said, I do think there's a chance that this game environment does fail, but even if it does, Pavia has such immense touchdown upside that you could see games like he had last week against LSU, where he ran the ball 17 times for 86 yards, scored it twice on the ground, scored it once through the air, put up 31 DraftKings points. That's the type of stuff that Pavia can do. I like Pavia here at 8,500. I do think he's a little expensive, but this offense runs through him. Now, at the running back position, Cedric Alexander is kind of a big play threat, but he doesn't get a ton of volume, which is kind of the problem, right? Because the whole concept would be like, hey, if this guy got enough volume, you could consistently see him break off long runs. But he really only did that against – his only long run this year has been against Alabama. But he has that potential in him. We've seen it before. We just don't know what the volume is going to look like. But he's only $5,100. So I think in terms of like a points per dollar perspective, he's certainly worth looking at, especially considering Pavia is probably going to be popular, and he works as a direct pivot off of Pavia. Now, at the wide receiver position, this is where it's kind of annoying for Vanderbilt. Their pass volume is just so low that it's really hard to pin down one of the wide receivers. Like, they just don't throw to one guy super consistently. They really spread out among 3 or 4. Junior Sherrill has been one of the best lately, had the huge game against Utah State. Eli Stowers is the tight end. He's a huge mismatch for whoever tries to cover him, but his outputs have been a little bit inconsistent. And then Trey Richardson started off the season as the number 1 wideout, but has really faded ever since. Makes him really tough to target in that regard. So this is not a great wide receiver room to target. Next up, we've got BYU taking on Iowa State. Iowa State is 2.5 point favorites, meaning the implied total is about well, hold on. Let me rephrase. BYU and Iowa State. Iowa State is 2.5-point favorites. The game total is 48.5, meaning the implied total is about 25 to 23 in favor of the Cyclones. Y'all, it is late at night. I have had a long day. I apologize for stumbling over my words. So, on this game, I don't know how DraftKings' algorithm for pricing for college football works. I do know that generally in the NFL, the way they price guys is they want you to hit 4 times your salary 1/4 of the time, right? I don't think they had that same algorithm in college because Bear Bachmeier for BYU is essentially averaging 4 times value for his salary. He has not been under 23 DraftKings points in a conference game, and that was against Utah, a verifiably good defense. He's now taken on Iowa State, a defense that is 64th in the nation in rush yards allowed. Bachmeier's a little bit of a dual threat, double-digit carries in every single conference game. We've also seen Iowa State struggle to deal with dual-threat quarterbacks like Brendan Sorsby, like Caden Salter, like Avery Johnson. I think this is a smash spot for Bear Bachmeier, $6,300. This is not a guy that I normally play. Like, this is a quarterback wearing number 47. It's not aesthetically pleasing, but he's good. And especially in DFS purposes, when you're getting a lot more points for the rushing, he's a good play. And he's at $6,300. This is a bad price tag. He's a guy I'm going to be all over this week. At the running back position, BYU does have a workhorse running back in LJ Martin. However, the downside is a lot of his rushing volume does get eaten into from Bear Bachmeier. And so you're really, really dependent on him having a lot of success. Now, can he have success against Iowa State? Absolutely. I think that what he does, he's a very downhill runner. Iowa State, a team that is going to play a lot of 3-high, a lot of light boxes. I think that does play into LJ Martin's strengths. I don't think I would play Bachmeier and Martin together, but I do think that individually they are good plays because Bachmeier does eat into Martin. But like I said, Martin's such a workhorse in every conference game so far, 15, 21, 25, 26 carries. Like, he's still getting a lot of carries, but he is getting eaten into from Bachmeier. Now, the wide receiver position. I don't think you have to play Bear Bachmeier stacked. I'm probably not going to. I don't know. I struggle to talk myself into it, y'all. There's not a whole lot of receivers that he throws to, but they're not a whole lot of productive either. You've got Parker Kingston, who's like this big play threat gadget guy who's been really good lately, but is that something that's sustainable? I don't know. You've got Chase Roberts, who's kind of like this dependable possession guy, but they're not throwing enough volume to get him there very often. It's just a hard situation to target. But for that reason, I think a lot of my Bachmeier lineups are going to be unstacked. And, I usually don't do this on the show. I'm kind of thinking through an idea on the show. Could you just play Bachmeier and Martin together and just say, hey, I'm going to capture all of BYU's points, and if BYU scores like 30 in this game, I'm going to be a winner? Maybe. Like I said, I normally don't like talking myself into ideas here on the show, but that is one that actually just occurred to me because I did it last weekend in the NFL. I played Dylan Gabriel and Quinshon Judkins together, and you might think on paper that was a horrible idea, but yet at the same time, Judkins got all the touchdowns. Combined, the two of them hit value, even though it wasn't necessarily, an even partnership. So you could absolutely do something like that with Bachmeier and Martin. All right, let's talk about Iowa State now. Iowa State, one of the favorites of the show. Well, maybe not. Rocco Becht. He's been pretty solid for us all season long. Like we played him because DraftKings kind of refuses to bump up his price, and he continues to produce. He continues to really carry this Iowa State team on his back. Now, if you're wondering, wait a minute, why is Iowa State a 2-loss team favored over BYU, an undefeated team? Big reason why is because Iowa State has been riddled with injuries, and now they're getting back healthy. That can be really helpful for Rocco. We've seen the upside for him against Cincinnati, put up 39 DraftKings points. I think this is a pretty good spot for him. I might be on him, and I do think I'm going to have a game stack of this game. At running back, I could not have less interest in either Iowa State running back because what you're seeing right now is Carson Hansen was hurt, and so his price didn't drop because it's not like he got a 0 or anything, right? Like it didn't affect his average. And then Abu Sama is sitting there at $6,000. He got the price bump from having a huge game last game going against Colorado as a starting running back in place of Hansen. I'm having to refresh my tab here, y'all, because DraftKings is being very slow. So they're priced up and they're going to split carries 50-50. That is a horrible combination for DFS. Horrible, absolutely horrible. You don't want expensive running back committees. That's like the biggest no I can think of, right? So I'm out on the Iowa State running back situation. At the wide receiver position, we have gotten a little bit more consistency out of the Iowa State wide receiver. They still haven't been great. I do think Sowell is going to end the season as the wide receiver one. Maybe a bye week could be effective for him to help get there. The tight end Brahmer's a pretty solid option. Ben Eskildson, the other receiver, is also an option. I don't mind either of the two of them, but it's really hard to depend on anybody else on this team. All right, next up, the game of the day, not from a real life perspective, God no, but from a DFS perspective. We have got Cincinnati as 4.5-point favorites taking on Baylor. Game total of 67.5 points, the Slate's highest, meaning the implied total is about 36-31 in favor of Cincinnati. This is the only game where both teams are implied to score north of 30 points. And a big reason why is just because of how bad the Baylor defense is, and the Cincinnati defense isn't too great either. Baylor ranks 94th in passing yards allowed and 117th in rushing yards allowed. We've talked all season long. This Baylor team really struggles with two things: running it straight ahead and throwing it deep. And if you're good at one of those things against Baylor, you can score a lot of points. However, Cincinnati's also found themselves in some shootouts this season too. So I'm not afraid to target this Cincinnati defense. They gave up 400 passing yards, 41 DraftKings points to Jalen Daniels earlier in this season, and they rank 124th in the nation in passing yards allowed. That's music to the ears of Sawyer Roberts, who is going to throw it and throw it and throw it and throw it and throw it. He's hit 300 yards in 3 straight games. He's had multiple passing touchdowns in every game this season. I like Sawyer Robertson a lot, y'all. $8,700. I normally don't like paying pocket passers that expensive, but the game environment, the matchup dictates it, and he also has stacking partners, so I think this is a pretty good spot for him. The running back position for Baylor, Bryson Washington is listed as questionable. Oh, I'm sorry. He was actually updated 11 minutes ago to available for Saturday's game. Cool. He's also been banged up. He hasn't played 100%, hasn't been himself. What do I make of that? I don't know. I really don't. But yeah, he hasn't been himself this season. Just hasn't been able to get right. So that might be more of a split. Michael Turner might play more snaps. I don't really know what to make of this situation now that Washington is out. I had a whole blurb plan based on him being questionable, and now I don't know what to do. But I assure you, if Washington was 100%, he'd be getting more carries. So I do think that there's something to that. Turner might be getting a little bit of run. At the wide receiver position, Baylor's tough because Michael Trigg is their target earner, but he's a tight end, and he just doesn't have elite single game upside, in my opinion, especially where he's priced at. Josh Cameron is the guy who has a ton of upside, and that's the guy that I'm going to be stacking with Sawyer Robertson when I play him. Has the highest single game DraftKings score of any Baylor receiver this season at 38. Ashton Hawkins is next up in targets. He's been really unlucky from a touchdown perspective. 31 catches, no touchdowns. He's due for one. Don't mind the idea of playing him at 4,800 or Cole Wilson at 4,200, who also is consistently targeted as a part of this offense. Don't mind him at all. And then also you got Kobe Prentice at 38. All he does is score touchdowns. Scored a touchdown in almost every game so far. He has seen his price creep up a little bit. He doesn't play as many snaps as the other options that I mentioned, so the pathway is a little more narrower, but they definitely do look to throw to him into the end zone. Now, on the Cincinnati side, we mentioned how bad this Baylor defense is, right? So take advantage of that. And one way to take advantage of that is by playing Brendan Sorsby, who's been so good for us this season. He's at $7,400, meaning that you want about 30 DraftKings points to feel really, really good about yourselves. About 23 would have you feeling pretty good. 30 would have you feeling real, real good, right? And he has hit 30 in 4 out of 7 games this season. Largely because of his rushing upside, but a little bit with his passing as well. He's been doing it both ways. Love Sorsby this week. Great matchup, great spot, great price tag. At the running back position, it's a committee, but it's a committee with defined role. Tui Walker is going to see more volume. He's a little bit of a plotter, less of a explosive run guy, whereas Pryor is the guy that's going to see less carries, but he's going to break off the explosives. I think that makes Pryor the guy I want against Baylor because I think that Baylor is a team that does like to give up explosive runs. So I do think Pryor is worth looking at for that upside. Wide receiver position, I'm willing to play a few guys for the Cincinnati side. Cyrus Allen is their best wide receiver, been their best stacking partner all season long. 2 games over 25 DraftKings points. Definitely the guy I think that should be stacked with Brendan Sorsby. But I wouldn't fault you if you mixed it up. Jeff Caldwell had a huge game against UCF. Scored twice in that game. Caleb Goody, also no stranger to having good games, 3 games over 14 DraftKings points this year. And then Joe Royer, the tight end, one of the best tight ends in all college football, who's put up 15 DraftKings points 3 times this year. So a lot of upside with the Cincinnati stacking partners here in this one. I do think you can play Sorsby single stacked. Maybe if you want to get fancy because they're so cheap, you could even play a Sorsby double. All right, last game of the day, my Texas Longhorns taking on Mississippi State. Texas is 7.5-point favorites. Game total 44.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 26-18 in favor of the Longhorns. And I'm just going to say, y'all, the Texas offense has been bad. It's been bad. And I have come on here and said that Arch needs more help. Offensive line hasn't been good. Receivers haven't been good, which is kind of accurate. Last week against Kentucky, Arch wasn't good either. And it was an ugly game. Now, what we've seen with Arch, though, is that he tends to respond very well after the ugly games. Ugly game against Ohio State, 35 against San Jose State. Ugly game against UTEP, 40 against Sam Houston State. Ugly game against, well, I guess the Florida game, he was pretty good from a DraftKings perspective. Last year, he played against Mississippi State, put up north of 30 DraftKings points. I've said this before. One of these games, it's going to click for Arch Manning, and he's going to put up a GPP winning score, and he's going to be like 1% owned because everybody's going to look at this game log and think, how could you possibly play Arch Manning? Mississippi State's not a good defense, y'all. This could be a week where Arch Manning could pop off. He's going to make my player pool. Yes, I'm a homer, but I see the vision that eventually it's just going to click for him, and he does tend to respond well off of bad games. Now, I do think that Quintravion Wisner is also going to make my player pool at the running back position. So he's been the workhorse running back as long as C.J. Baxter has been out. Mississippi State ranks 101st in the nation in rushing yards allowed. Wisner, we also saw heavy elite usage in the passing game last year. We're going to be on Wisner here this week again. At the wide receiver position, Ryan Wingo, most consistently targeted receiver all year long, gets deep targets as well, high ADOT guy, but just really hasn't been there from a production standpoint because of how bad the Texas offense has been. It's really annoying. And they're going to play a plethora of guys after Wingo. Wingo's really the only one that's separated from the group when it comes to target share. DeAndre Moore has been pretty solid recently, but nothing huge. I think Wingo would be the guy I would want to stack with Manning. Now, on the Mississippi State side, I'm probably going to full fade this team. As bad as everybody wants to make fun of the Texas offense, the Texas defense is still really, really stout. Really good. And so Blake Shapen, $6,100, great price tag. Sorry, bud, I'm making the cut. At running back position, Fluff Bothwell, who's been great for them, is questionable for this game. Devon Booth, sorry, bud. And then at the wide receiver position, maybe I could talk myself into Brennan Thompson because he's such a speedster. All it would take is one play or two plays for him to hit value at $3,700, but not really interested outside of that. All right, that is going to do it here for us this week, y'all. Hopefully we gave you guys all the information you need in order to build some winning DraftKings lineups or FanDuel lineups even here for this Saturday main slate. Remember, before we go, make sure if you want more from me, follow me on Twitter, join the Fantasy Corner Discord, go check out the articles on the Patreon, and rate and review if you're listening on audio. Hit the like button if you're watching on YouTube. Helps me out so much when you guys do that. We will be going live Thursday night around 9:30 p.m. Eastern time to talk the Week 9 main slate. So if you get any specific questions, anybody, any player, any strategy, if you want to talk underdog drafts, you want to talk player props, whatever, be there for it. Just join the live chat, but you'll know when we go live if you are subscribed. That's going to do it here for this. That's going to do it here for this episode, y'all. God, we have really struggled. It's late tonight. It's been a long day. Struggle with my words here in this episode. So thank you guys for making it through to this point. Best of luck to you guys on this Week 9 main slate. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this point, and I will see you guys next time.